Big tech companies are getting into bed with communist China, and it's having a chilling effect on the world. Apple's CEO, Tim Cook, not looking so great after his company limited a key iPhone function used by Chinese anti-COVID lockdown protesters. Cook tried to smooth things over by meeting with lawmakers on Capitol Hill, saying the changes were meant to boost security. But watch him act like a total coward when confronted by Fox Business reporter Hillary Vaughn.
Hi, Mr. Cook. Do you support the Chinese people's right to protest? Do you have any reaction to the factory workers that were beaten and detained for protesting COVID lockdowns? Do you regret restricting airdrop access that protesters used to evade surveillance from the Chinese government? Do you think it's problematic to do business with the Communist Chinese Party when they suppress human rights?
That comes as we get a disturbing new report on how China used TikTok in order to tip the scales in our midterms. Apparently, accounts run by the propaganda arm of the Chinese government have accumulated millions of followers. They were bashing Republicans and praising Democrats without really clearly disclosing they were being posted by a foreign government. So Hillary Vaughn really drew some blood out there on old Timmy, didn't she?
I got to tell you, Hillary Vaughn is now my hero. I mean, she just had one after the other after the other. Look, how disappointing, and that's a very soft word, is it that the head of Apple is literally taking a position that the Chinese government wants, the only country in the world that wants to limit airdrop so that the protesters can evade actually the policing by the Chinese communists and communicate with each other. Because once they're identified as protesters, they're taken in, they're beaten, and we never hear from them again. And for Tim Cook to not answer a question when it is so anti-democratic, and it's all about the money for him. And then to watch the opposite of that with Twitter, you know, we're now learning Twitter is now involved in the election, or was involved in the 2020 election, and was putting certain information higher up or suppressing certain information, and then the Hunter laptop on top of it. The United States government is now in the business of suppressing free speech, and they're doing it for political purposes, and that is just plain wrong.
And Elon Musk said he's going to release some information about the suppression of the laptop, and we'll bring that to you if we see it come in. So the CEO didn't say a word. Is that a good strategy, or should he have stopped and talked to our very own Hillary Vaughn?
Well, I agree. Hillary Vaughn did a great job. It's good to be back with everybody. I've been gone all week.
We've been missing you.
We're in the middle, just to take a step back, we're in the middle of, I think, of a reset around the scope in terms of our relationship, economic relationship with China. I think it's unfair to put the onus or the burden on one CEO to try to answer, although I probably would have had an answer. His press people should have had some sort of response, knowing that he might be asked these questions. But in fairness, we on this set have been critical of business leaders when they get in the middle of politics. And I have not always, so I'm being consistent. I think he should have answered those questions. But at the same time, we can't expect a CEO of a large company to help determine what is larger government and public policy needs to be sorted out. That's no excuse for not answering the question. Here are the terms, Judge, in all fairness, here are the terms that are being talked about. You have IP concerns. You have access to their markets, access to our markets. You have national security concerns. You have trade concerns. You have a support of illicit regimes, or I should say hostile regimes. All of this has to be sorted out at the federal level and at a larger policy level. Again, we have to have a reset, though, before these ideas, and for that matter, these matters are going to be resolved. Finally, I think of, as we talk about the people there in China, we can shake our heads, but these are real issues. You buy products from China all the time. So if you really feel as strongly as you do, and I believe you do, you should stop devouring food, buying things that are made in China.
You're not answering the question.
I did say.
Tim Cook
has
allowed the Chinese people to invade.
Tim Cook is not allowed it.
He's the president of the company.
He didn't. But listen,
he didn't know.
He should have answered the question.
It's the only country in the world.
Then throw your Apple away. Throw that phone away right now if you feel that strong. You know why you're not going to do that? Because you don't feel that strong.
Tim, I do
if you don't feel that strong.
Look,
at the end of the day, these are the kinds of issues that have to be litigated at the federal level. This is policy. And there's federal policy that needs to be reset. I'm agreeing with you, but if you feel as strongly as you do, I'm not throwing away mine.
What are you agreeing with me on? What are you agreeing?
That these matters need to be resolved, and Tim Cook probably should have answered
I'm not looking for matters need to be resolved. Answer the question
throw away
and
your
explain
Apple.
to the American people
Then throw away your
why
phone.
you put it.
If you feel that strongly-
that's not the answer. Tell
Okay,
the
it probably
American
was- it
people
probably was made
why you think it's a good idea to identify protesters who end up being killed
I don't
as a
think that-
result of the Communist Chinese Party.
He should have answered. I agree with you. He should have answered that question. But us consumers, if we feel
Not
that strongly,
answered it.
throw
Why
away the
did he
phone.
do it?
All
Throw
right,
away the
let's
phone.
move on. Kennedy, are you interested in what Elon might be releasing to the world about the Hunter Biden cover-up?
I'm actually, I am interested in that because I think there's a lot that's been happening. We know has been happening, and he's going to give us confirmation of that. That's what I expect. But to Harold's point, because you sort of mush together about 4 different things. Part of that is the U.S. government. Part of that is Apple. But the way you talk about it, it's as though it's one entity, which is the most concerning thing we face in this country. Big tech and big government
I didn't mean it to say it
getting
that way.
together.
Kidding, I didn't mean to say it that way.
Yes, Apple has to worry about market share. Above market share is human freedom. And having access to talking with other people, coordinating protests, and standing up against an authoritarian, murderous regime, that's what Tim Cook could have allowed. The United States government, they have to figure out what is our foreign policy? How do we interface as a country with China? But to the judge's point, these inalienable, God-given human rights are above what Apple might make appeasing the Communist Chinese Party. Elon Musk, in contrast, made Starlink available to Ukrainian people so they could coordinate and get themselves and their families to safety and also have some sort of a vigilante offense on their own. Tim Cook could have done the same thing, opening up airdrop to these desperate people. They're left holding up white pieces of paper, blank pieces of paper to symbolize what they would like to say, but they cannot because they have been silenced by the
Let me be
communists.
clear. I'm not on that side. I said he should have answered that question. I'm only saying there's a larger set of issues here that have to be litigated. If we feel that strongly, throw your iPhone away.
No, that's not what it. He
Well, no,
should,
but-
not
but-
that he
no, no,
should
but
have
you don't-
answered
no,
the
I'm-
question.
first of all-
He shouldn't have done it.
I am pro-America. I am against them. I'm not going to allow you to align me with them. If you feel as strongly, throw your doggone iPhone away.
I'm not
I don't.
aligning you with them.
Jimmy.
Listen, in all due respect to these lovebirds down the end. That Tim Cook video, it's so embarrassing. You know what he looked like? He looked like me walking past one of those environmental people with the clipboards on 6th Avenue. Do you have 2 seconds for climate? No, I don't, as a matter of fact. And the cause has changed 7 times. It was, do you have 2 minutes? We're freezing. Do you have 2 minutes? We're going to melt. But stick with me. Okay, you can't tell me we don't have free speech problems when the CEO of the biggest company in the world isn't allowed to talk to the media. They told him to shut up. That's media training 101 because he knows if he responds, he amplifies the story. And that's what we were watching in that moment, is him realizing it's time to play a little bit of defense. But every one of these companies that throws up a rainbow or a Ukrainian flag or a pronoun doesn't care about human rights. And if they did, they'd have the balls to say something because people are dying. And it's not as simple, Harold, as just divesting ourselves from this technology because this technology has its own set of entanglements and considerations. So I get what you're trying to say, which is, if you really feel that way. But if Apple really felt that way, just give China the finger. Are they an American company or are they a Chinese company? I think what we learned is they're a Chinese company.
Look, all I'm
Don't
saying
make
is
me
everybody-
choose between my phone and my integrity.
Thank
Harold.
you.
We all thought prosperity on both sides would help pave a way around these human rights issues, and it is not. That's my only point. Do you have to have a reset with this relationship? Sure, I don't think we should
Oh,
throw this
Hillary
away.
has a reset button.
But everything has to be redone here, and it's national security, it's capital markets, all of these things.
Can I just tell you
How
one
do
thing?
we do that? Sit down and talk to them? I don't think so.
You know, if we
have
get...
to bring in all these companies to the White House and figure out what is it that you're willing to do, what is it that you cannot do, what can we produce
Is
more
Musk
here in
allowed
America?
at the White House?
Yeah.
Well, he would have to. I would invite him. I would have to. I think he would have to.
President Harold.
You would have to invite him.
Hey, and why
President
is,
Harold, it's good to
why
be
is
with you.
TikTok, President. Why is TikTok running so
Thank
freely?
you.
That's a Chinese company.
They should not be. Mark Warner
Harold,
is the
did
one.
you know-
That's a good point about TikTok, Harold. I mean, if you add Minnie Madoff buying the Senate with fraudulent cash and the TikTok interference,
That's right.
That is a double dose of election
Senator
interference in
Mark
the
Warner, the
midterms.
Democrat, that
That's
chaired
not-
the
Double doses,
Intelligence
Harold.
Committee,
To his
has been
credit.
the most outspoken person on this, and I
his
agree with him
credit.
100%.
We agree on that.
We agree on
We
a lot
do?
of things.
All right.
Mark Warner.
Hey, Sean Hannity here. Hey, click here to subscribe to Fox News YouTube page and catch our hottest interviews and most compelling analysis. You will not get it anywhere else.